Welcome back to the Anarchy Analysis series, where we have reached Malmö with 2 teams remaining in the battle for the crown. Let's take a deep dive into a rematch from round 2 between Rogue and G2.
Let's get into it!
Let's get into draft and kick off with the bans. 3 constant bans throughout this series, the Lucian for G2 and the Silas in the center for Rogue. I don't need to realistically explain these bans too heavily, but let's just say this. G2 watched the Rogue vs Fnatic series and said comp should not be allowed that champ. Moreover, in the previous matchup, G2 refused to let the pick through draft as well, which indicates back then that Rogue had probably been practicing it. As for Rogue, their bans also reflect their previous encounter, with the center being dominant for G2 throughout the series, and Caps' Silas has an ungodly win rate during the regular season, so clearly he is doing something right with this pick. Speaking of picks, let's look at them. Big surprises in the mid lane, as a Shock LeBlanc is locked in for Larson. This is a huge pivot to what he normally plays, as a more assassin-like nature needs to be utilized with this pick. So this is a drastic change to how usually Rogue play, and that can be seen with the rest of their comp. With a lot of engage and aggression, this comp is built to stop engages onto them as they steamroller over the opposition. So let's get onto the Rift. 15 minutes on the clock, and G2 are looking to secure an Ocean Jake. Malrang for Rogue steps up, knowing if shit goes down, his team will back him up, and G2 want to stop a 50-50, but in my opinion, they make the contest a lot more easier. Jankos cataclysms Malrang, but the Drake is still aggroed onto him, and that slight movement towards where Jankos is allows for Malrang to smite steal it. Now, G2 are forced into a fight to kill Malrang so that they can salvage something off a losing play. But as you try to kill the Trundle, the Soraka speed passive kicks in and she is there in time to keep the troll alive long enough for a trade onto Caps. Now while Targetmaster could flash bailout on the Ahri, he instead lets her die, and the fight descends into chaos from this point onwards. Bailout is put onto Jankos as he has the ability to flag and drag engage when his cooldowns are up. G2 can essentially think they can win this fight from here onwards as the Gwen arrives in the fight, focusing the one champ keeping Rogue alive in Soraka. They chase her out the river where they think she is inevitably dead. But no, a clutch face call pulls her to safety, and you would think the fight's over, Rogue getting out with everything they want and G2 live to fight another day. But no! Face call back into G2 is what Trimby decides to do, and as they enter a bounce house of hurt, as 3 people get launched into the air off the Callista R2, and another set of 3 are launched up from Ornn E. This deletes the Renata off the Rift, and G2 are stifled as the Ren stacks get ripped out of their bounce house bonanza, taking us into game 2 with an ace for Rogue. Drafts on screen and let's get into it. Callista, thrown into the bans, forces us down the proverbial poll of viable picks even more, as Caitlyn, the rogue classic bot laner, comes into the draft this time, and this champion provides more siege and more range potential to Rogue, who in game 1 had hard focused the Drakes as they wanted to control the team fighting area of the map, as they had clearly the stronger draft. This game, with a Caitlyn locked, you expect time to be invested, but to allow the tower siege to be devastating in Rogue's favour. As for G2, they have gone with a very simple front to back team fighting comp that realistically excels in sustaining through long, heavy fights as well as all the burst. Onto the rift for game number 2, 26 minutes on the clock, and the teams are setting up the battle lines for the ensuing Drake fight. Rogue have set up first around the pit, forcing G2 to clear out vision and brave the unknown. This is where Malrang actually excels. He's been known during his time in the LEC as the guy who finds insane hiding spots that surprise the enemy, and what we see is exactly that. Hiding alongside Larson, they wait for G2's approach, and what we end up seeing is Rogue efficiently bursting down one target. They don't spread their damage needlessly, and the choice of target is defined pretty much before any damage is thrown down. I am going to rapid fire all the tools they use to kill Yankos here. Charm into Flang Drag, into Renekton, Slice and Dice, plus his Q, and the Abyssal Dive from TK are all used before the Trundle ult can come out and save his life. Notice how the assist shows no Caitlyn on that? That's because she shot once into Lissandra, who immediately was forced into ult, which is kind of counterintuitive if you think about it, because Caitlyn just puts a trap underneath her, and as soon as the ultimate times out, boom, headshot comes through, and that's immediate burst onto Caps' Lissandra. He's forced into Zhonya's again, and it's the same thing that happens again, another boom headshot, and now G2 are in a situation without a mid laner and without a jungler. Top laner is pretty much not involved. The bot lane is now forced into a run. And guess what? Jarvan is on the Rogue side. He's still got ultimate, so he cataclysms them both, forcing them into a run, and they're just chased down. Ace in the hold, and just taken off the rift, giving the fight over to Rogue in a 4-for-0 trade that gives them the Drake and control over game 2. And this is where our LEC journey ends for 2022, as Rogue beat G2 3-0 in what could be described a dominant and calculated series out of Rogue. This was the reverse of their round 2 matchup with G2. It was everything we saw G2 do to Rogue thrown back in G2's face when it mattered most. I'm going to be brutally honest here. Rogue as a team, I've always had faith in. If you see my prediction series throughout the years, I always say the boys in blue have got this. They've become my favourite team in the LEC over the years, and I'm a big fan of them, honestly. While I don't think Worlds will be as fruitful as the LEC was, I certainly think that this team has a lot to show on an international stage. They had gained experience during last year's Worlds, which was probably their best experience you can get on the international stage for them. And now returning as the first seed for EU. They've got some difficult opponents. But Rogue is, it's been said for many years, is the textbook team. They hard research, they counter, they build drafts to beat you. And I think in this series here, when it mattered most, we saw unique stuff from Rogue that I think transcended down into the EU Masters recently. With the Soraka, I believe I've seen it quite a bit in EU Masters, being picked up and utilized how as this sort of counter to the Poppy that we've been needing for a while. It's also a massive counter to the Gwen. It's just a massive counter all around that's finally seeing some play. It's great, and I think it will transcend into the world's meta slightly, but don't quote me on that. And the big changes I think we need to talk about going into Worlds for these teams is, I don't see EU as the most stopwatchy region. I see us as the more, we'll fight you and we'll beat you with just pure strength region than anything else, or that we'll play the map a little bit better. We're just good at everything in comparison to, say, the LPL, who is built around fighting you whenever and whenever. That sort of Mad Lion style, which we'll be seeing at Worlds. And I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be intriguing to me to see how all of Europe does here. And while this series, I should realistically talk about how it was dominant for Rogue, I think we're gonna see a lot of uniqueness out of these teams, with stopwatches and Zhonya's increasing in price. I know that it's still going to be prevalent in the meta. It's still a big change that could affect how Korean teams, how Chinese teams play League, as they use these tools so much to stay alive and keep their fights going. That's going to be huge to see. And with that, for me in the LEC, it's time up. Thank you very much for watching the final Anarchy analysis for Europe this year. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like down below, subscribe if you're new, if you want to. I'll see you guys for play-in predictions coming up very soon. Peace out.